In November of 2021, I moved from New Jersey to a small artsy town in northern Oregon after quitting my job. I needed a reset, a slower pace, and I thought working at a quiet local restaurant would be a decent way to ease into the community. The place I got hired at was called an old converted farmhouse turned upscale eatery that had this rustic charm with low lighting, exposed wood beams, and a warmth that felt genuine. Or at least it did at first. I was brought on as a server, mostly working the evening shifts. The restaurant wasn't huge, maybe 25 tables, spread across a few cozy rooms, but there was one table in particular that no one ever wanted to take. Table 17. Tucked away in the back room near the fireplace, it looked like the best seat in the house if you didn't know better. It was always kept set. Water glasses polished, silverware lined up perfectly, but none of the servers, not even the manager, assigned it unless absolutely necessary. It wasn't marked out of service or anything, but it was like an unspoken rule. No one talked about it, and I didn't ask. But one night, a couple walked in late, just before closing. The other tables were already being bussed and reset, and the only one that still looked ready to go was, you guessed it, table 17. The hostess was new and didn't know the rules, so she seated them there without thinking. Everyone in the back froze when she called it over the headset. My manager looked at me, didn't say a word, just nodded. I was the closest. It was my turn. From the moment I walked into that back room, I felt wrong, not scared exactly, just unsettled, like walking into someone else's home without knocking. The fireplace was out, even though it was supposed to be on for ambience. The air felt cooler than the rest of the restaurant, and there was this faint, bitter smell like burnt wood and copper. The couple didn't seem to notice anything. They were quiet, polite, but something about them made me uneasy. They were dressed in outdated clothes, her in this long velvet coat, him in a brown corduroy blazer. Their faces were pale, a little waxy, but the way they stared at each other, never speaking, was what really got to me. They just sat there holding hands over the table, eyes locked, not blinking much. I took their drink order, brought 2 glasses of Merlot, and when I came back to check on them, the glasses were untouched, still full, but they thanked me without moving their lips. I swear to you, I heard voices clear and calm, but their mouths never moved. I told myself I was tired, that I was imagining things, that it was just a long shift and I needed to stop overthinking. When I returned with their food, steak frites and a mushroom risotto, neither of them reacted. They didn't even look at the plates. Just kept staring at each other. I placed the food down, said I'd be back to check in, and walked away quickly. That's when things started to go sideways. The overhead lights in that back room flickered and dimmed until it was practically candlelit. I asked the manager if he turned the dimmer down, but he looked confused, said the back room wasn't even on a dimmer. A busser went in to reset another table and came out seconds later looking pale and shaken. He said he felt like someone was breathing down his neck the entire time. The air was freezing again. When I finally worked up the nerve to check on table 17 again, the plates were empty, completely clean, not a scrap of food left. But I never saw them eat, not once. The couple smiled at me, wide and unnatural, and handed me a black card for the bill. No name, no bank logo, just matte black with a silver number string. I hesitated, but ran it through the POS system anyway. To my shock, it worked. The payment went through and a receipt printed, and that's when I saw the timestamp. The receipt said the dinner was served on November 3rd, 1993, exactly 28 years to the day. My hands went cold. I checked my watch. It was definitely 2021. I looked back at the table. Empty. The plates were gone, glasses gone, the black card gone, chairs pushed in, as if no one had ever been there, but I had the receipt. I ran to the back office to show my manager, but when I pulled it from my apron, it had changed. The timestamp now matched our current date, but the table number was blank. Just a smudge of faded ink. I didn't sleep that night. The next day I asked around. One of the older line cooks, a guy who had worked there since the 90s, finally told me. A couple used to come there every November, regulars, always sat at table 17. One year they never left. A fire broke out in the back room after closing. No one knew what started it. Their bodies were never found. Just 2 melted rings and a burnt-out table. Since then, staff claim to see them once every few years, always on November 3rd. Always at table 17. I quit a week later, moved out of town, but sometimes when I go out to eat, I still find myself avoiding the table in the farthest corner of the room, especially if it's already set but no one's sitting there. Because if you see them, they've already chosen you. I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona, back in October of 2020 when I took a temporary job at a roadside diner called Penny's Stop, just off Route 66. The diner had been around for decades, one of those classic chrome-plated joints with red booths, a long bar counter and neon signs that flickered constantly like they were caught in some kind of loop. I was helping out during the graveyard shift because they were short-staffed, and honestly, I needed the money. My first couple nights were uneventful, just the usual drifters, truckers and night owls coming in for coffee and eggs at 2 a.m. But my third night was different. It started when this man walked in wearing a grey overcoat and black leather gloves, even though it wasn't cold out. He didn't speak a word when he entered, didn't look around, just sat in the farthest booth, the one right under the busted breakfast served all night sign that never lit up. I walked over, smiled and gave him a menu, but he didn't acknowledge me, just kept staring down at the tabletop like he was lost in it. Eventually he raised a hand, slowly, like it took effort, and tapped the side of his coffee cup. I didn't remember putting one there, but sure enough, there it was, filled halfway with dark coffee. I assumed one of the cooks must have placed it while I wasn't looking. I asked if he wanted cream or sugar, and again, no answer. Just that same frozen stare. What made it weirder was that every time I glanced back at him from the counter, it looked like he was sitting in a slightly different position, like his posture kept resetting. At one point, I thought I saw his head tilt all the way back like he was looking up at the ceiling. But when I blinked, he was back to normal. It was subtle, like frames missing in a video. Then came the smell, not bad exactly, but old, like mildew and mothballs and something else, coppery, metallic. I checked the bathrooms, the kitchen, even the break room fridge, but nothing explained it. When I returned to the counter, the man's coffee was empty, and the cup was turned upside down. That's when I noticed something etched into the ceramic. Underneath the cup, scratched so lightly I almost missed it, was a message. Table 9 is ready. I looked around the diner. We only had 8 tables. There was no table 9. I asked my cook, Jerry, if this was some kind of prank. He laughed it off and said that table didn't exist anymore. When I pressed him, he got quiet and said, "It used to be there, where the storeroom is now. They bricked it over years ago. Don't ask why." Of course I asked why. He looked uncomfortable and finally told me something about a regular who used to sit there every single night in the 90s. Guy disappeared one day, never picked up his tab. When cops investigated, they found something in the wall behind the booth. Jerry wouldn't say what, just that the place was closed for 2 weeks and reopened without table 9. I couldn't stop thinking about the message under the cup. That night, around 4 a.m., I got this strange urge to check the storeroom. I told myself it was just curiosity, but deep down, it felt like I was being drawn to it. The room was dark, cold, and stacked with dry goods and spare equipment, but in the back, where the wall met the floor, I saw it. A faint outline of a square, like where a table used to be. And a chair, just one. Old, dusty, wood-cracked, definitely not one of ours. I should have left it alone. I should have shut the door and gone back to the counter, but I didn't. I walked over slowly and placed my hand on the back of the chair. And suddenly the overhead light flickered once and went dead. In the darkness I felt something shift behind me. Not heard, felt, like pressure in the air had changed. When the light flicked back on a few seconds later, the chair was pulled out from the wall, just slightly, enough for someone to sit down. I slammed the storeroom shut and refused to go back in there for the rest of my shift. When morning came, I told the manager everything. He just looked at me and said, "He's early this year." "What do you mean early?" I asked. "He only shows up every 5 years on the anniversary. Someone sits in that chair and doesn't leave. You just saw the beginning." I quit that same day. But the story doesn't end there. A month later, I drove past Penny's Stop and saw it was boarded up, permanently closed. Local news said there had been an electrical fire in the storeroom. No injuries, but they found a charred wooden chair with a single ceramic coffee cup fused to the floor beneath it. They never did figure out how the fire started, but I think I know. And I never drink coffee in diners anymore, especially when the booth's already set, and the seat's already pulled out. In October of 2015, I took a job as a night cleaner at a family-owned Italian restaurant just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. It wasn't glamorous, but I needed the work. The restaurant was cozy and inviting during the day, but after closing, when the chairs were flipped onto tables and the lights dimmed, it had a completely different energy, one that clung to the air like damp fog. At first, I chalked it up to the silence and stillness of the place, the hum of refrigeration units, and my own overactive imagination. I worked alone, which the manager assured me was common for after-hours cleaning staff. They gave me a checklist of what needed to be done each night: scrub the kitchen floors, sanitize the restrooms, wipe down tables and counters, and most importantly, make sure everything was reset for the next day. The last task was always to wipe down table 9, the one in the far corner under the antique mirror. It sat away from the others and didn't get used much during regular hours, though no one ever told me why. In fact, they never mentioned it at all. It just happened to always be the last table left uncleaned when I went through my rounds. The first time I noticed something strange was about 2 weeks into the job. I was mopping the kitchen when I heard the distinct scrape of a chair being pulled out across the dining room floor. I froze, mop in hand. I had locked the front doors myself and the back entrance was bolted shut. I called out, thinking maybe one of the owners had returned for something. No reply. When I crept into the dining area, the air felt cold, unnaturally cold for a place with working heating. Table 9's chair had been pulled out, slightly angled, as if someone was sitting and facing the mirror. I put it back under the table and returned to work, telling myself it must have already been that way, and I simply hadn't noticed. But after that, it kept happening. Some nights the chair would be pushed out, even though I remembered tucking it in. Other times the silverware would be arranged differently, one time with the knife pointed inward like someone had been gripping it. One night I even found a folded napkin placed in front of the seat, and on top of it a ring, gold, old, with a dull stone. I left it there, thinking someone had dropped it, though I knew deep down no one had been in the building since I locked the door. The next night it was gone. The weirdest part was the mirror. It was an antique, large and slightly warped, hanging directly over table 9. Sometimes, when I walked by, I'd catch a glimpse of someone else in the reflection. Not a clear image, just the sense of a dark outline standing behind me or seated at the table, only to vanish the moment I turned around. I started avoiding looking into it altogether. Then, one night in early November, something happened that still makes my skin crawl. I had just finished cleaning the restrooms and was heading to the dining room to wrap up. When I reached table 9, I saw a glass of red wine sitting on it. The glass was full, deep red, almost black in the low light. My heart dropped. I hadn't poured anything. There was no wine kept outside of the locked cellar, and I certainly wasn't losing my mind. I stood there frozen, staring at the glass, when I caught a flicker of motion in the mirror. Slowly, dread crawling up my spine, I turned toward the glass's reflection. A figure was sitting at the table. I could only see the back of their head and dark hair slicked back, wearing what looked like an old formal suit. I spun around. Nothing. The chair was empty. I looked back at the mirror. The figure remained, not moving, just there. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my things and left everything as it was, cleaning supplies out, lights still on, the glass untouched. I didn't even clock out. I didn't care. The next morning the manager called. He sounded irritated, asking why the restaurant had been left half cleaned and unlocked. I apologized and explained everything, down to the detail about the wine glass and the mirror. There was silence on the other end for a long time before he finally spoke. He didn't sound angry anymore. He just said, "You should have told us you saw him." Apparently, decades ago, when the restaurant had first opened, there was an incident. A man had reserved that table for an anniversary dinner, but his partner never showed. After waiting alone for nearly 2 hours, he went into the restroom and never came out. They found him collapsed, dead from what was ruled a sudden cardiac arrest. The mirror above table 9 was the only thing they kept from the original design when they renovated the place, and according to a few of the older staff, that table had always had problems. I never went back. I still don't drink red wine, and to this day, whenever I catch my reflection in a mirror, especially in dim lighting, I hesitate, just for a second, because once, not long ago, I saw someone else looking back at me, someone who was never supposed to be there. If these stories gave you chills, don't forget to like, share with someone who dares to listen, subscribe for more real horror, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a scream in the dark.